Hey, you too. You too. Wait a minute. Am I good here?
Yeah, you are.
Something just popped up. Okay.
No. It was telling you that the show was live.
Yeah, I
You're
got
going
it.
live.
I saw that. But I mean, I see that it pops up. Anyway, hey, Linear Bob. Thank you, sweetie. Thank you, Medi and Marnie. Love you. All right. Got you go. Gotta go. All right. Thank you. Gotta go. All right. Reverend Williams, how you doing?
I'm well, thank you. Good morning.
You hear my morning rant on. Well, you know what? I just
I
see us.
hear.
I hear us going. I see us going down a very, very dangerous road. I think,
Mhm.
and I think we've got to be very, very careful. And
Mhm. Mhm.
and you have people who are going to see. America is born in sedition and the overthrow of the biggest power in the world. Let us be clear on that.
Mhm.
The greatest, the empire. The sun never sets on the British Empire. The British Empire is tough today. Today.
Mhm.
So, January 6th is how these folks get down in America.
Right.
This is this is how the pilgrims get down, honey. So you want to play with these people, if you can play with them if you want to. Dr. King was new and was an anomaly in the American experience.
How are they missing the real cancel culture that's
Because that's
actually
not,
happening in front
we
of our
we shoot
face? The Republicans
people.
just spent the
That's
last
what we do.
month trying to cancel any.
So, so
Mhm.
I'm like, y'all better be careful, and you better be careful what you're calling for, because they're calling for you.
Right.
And eventually it's going to be everybody else, too. You just wait. So I'm like, honey, I'm not going to be around you unless you've been vaccinated. It would be one thing if it stopped you from, I mean, and it could evolve into being a real barrier
30.
between you and um, and COVID. And I am like pulling for that, because heaven knows nobody wants it. But
Mhm.
until that happens, let's
Mhm.
be honest about this. Y'all are asking for something that's real crazy.
15.
Anyway, so so I've said it.
10.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
Determined, unstoppable, achieving the impossible. We're standing tall with our heads held high. We are victorious.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Santita Jackson Show. It is Friday, May 21st, 2021. I'm Santita Jackson. It's a joy to be with you today from WCPT, the nation's largest progressive talk radio station, AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota, based up in Minneapolis, St. Paul. Special shout out to the Sounds of Blackness and their leader, Gary Hines. Of course, their music is opening the show, and he had a birthday yesterday. Love you, Gary. I love you, Sounds of Blackness. Love y'all. Love y'all. And congratulations. They're going to be performing on the Billboard Awards. That's right. And it's no one is more deserving than the Sounds of Blackness covering the waterfront on music. On music, they're great. I'm Santita Jackson. It's a joy to be with you today. I want you to call me or text me at 773 WCPT, 773 GWC Injury Lawyers gives you the opportunity to text. But call me too. I want to hear your voices. 773 763 9278, and meet me over on Facebook on the Santita Jackson and Friends page. Everybody like and share, and meet Andre and Linear Bob, who's up first this morning. He's out there in San Jose, California. I want you to know. Francis and Barbara Jean and Daryl and Ronnie. And let me see, Raphael, how you doing? Hey, Raphael, good morning, sweetie. And Veronica and Kenneth D and Christine and Maddie and Shirley from Philadelphia. I want all of you to please like and share on the Santita Jackson and Friends page and on the WCPT 820 page. We've got great programming here at this station. Stephanie Miller's behind me, and of course, Tom Hartman, and then Joni Esposito in the afternoons, and just if you want the best in progressive talk, stay right here on WCPT and on AM 950 radio in Minneapolis, St. Paul. And please like and subscribe on my YouTube channel, The Santita Jackson Show. The Santita Jackson Show. And meet me on Twitter at Santita J or at the Santita J Show. But I'm more active on at Santita J. So everybody, what are we going to be talking about today? Yes, there is a ceasefire. But is there peace? Well, there certainly is quiet, but is there peace in the Middle East? We're going to talk about that today in the second hour. What happened? How did all of this begin? And what brought about the ceasefire? And do we have peace or do we just have quiet? Until the next time. Wow. I want to hear from you. I want to hear Vanderlei. How you doing? You all are about to have a real presidential race on your hands. Bolsonaro is going to be faced by probably the most populist politician in decades in Brazil, Lula da Silva. I'm pulling for Lula. You know that. He is a great, great man. They've put him in jail. They've tried to do everything to keep him from running for president again, and yet his popularity has held. He's like Bernie Sanders, right? My father, Reverend Jackson, went down to help him campaign in the closing weeks of his first campaign for the presidency, because there was this really explosion in Black consciousness down in Brazil, and he said, I need you to help me to kind of rally the Black community in Brazil. Not that he really needed help, but I'm hoping and pulling for this man to come on and pull on through, because indeed he has been standing for the people for a long, long time. But we're going to be answering your questions about COVID-19 and infection prevention. Dr. Shanina Knighton and Dr. Deborah Holden. And of course, Dr. Knighton is an infection preventionist. What do you need to do as people are unmasking, as people are really, we're going to have Lollapalooza here in Chicago. That's 100,000 plus people every day. And the Nurses United, the largest nurses union in the United States, is saying, oh, whoa, we are reopening too fast. And these are the frontline workers. They're the ones who the doctors consult. It's got a lot to talk about today on the Santita Jackson Show, so let us get right to it. Well, the world is hailing as we get to some of these headlines. The ceasefire in the Middle East after 11 days of attacks, more than 1,300 Palestinians injured, more than, 230 people killed, and 12 killed in Israel. Wow, how tragic is it? How tragic is it? And we're going to be talking about that today on the Santita Jackson Show. What do you think about that, everybody? They're saying that the Democrats have had a tectonic shift on the conflict, demanding not only Israeli security, but Palestinian justice. Indeed, Bernie Sanders has said that the U.S.-made bombs are devastating Gaza, and he is aiming to block a $735 million weapons sale to Israel. As we watch the health system in Gaza almost collapse under the blockade, which is still in place against them, and these repeated wars. I'm going to talk about that. I want to hear from you. You can call me throughout the show at 773-763-WCPT, 773-763-9278. I want to know what you think about that. Well, guess what, everybody? As COVID-19 has ravaged the poor nations, guess what? Pharma vaccine execs they're 90 billionaires. Can you believe that? A new analysis out yesterday showed that pharmaceutical companies have immensely profited from monopoly control over coronavirus vaccines, and it has produced 9 new billionaires, according to the People's Vaccine Alliance, which is a global coalition of public health and humanitarian organizations. 9 newly minted billionaires have a combined wealth, get this, everybody, of $19.3 billion people, $19.3 billion. It's enough to fully vaccinate all people in low-income countries 1.3 times. Follow the money, everybody. Did you know that there's a permanent program, at least that's been demanded, to help give internet access to over 1 million families who are seeking broadband benefit? The FCC Commission acting chair, Jessica Rosenwood, announced yesterday that over 1 million households from 50 states plus D.C. and Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands and American Samoa enrolled in the emergency broadband benefit program during its first week. This is for families who are struggling, who need access to the internet. Wow, isn't that a wonderful thing? A real hotspot, everybody. I think we need to all become environmentalists. Over the past 5 decades, the Arctic has warmed 3 times faster than the world as a whole, everybody, leading to a rapid and widespread melting of ice and other far-reaching consequences that are important not only to local communities and ecosystems, but to the fate of life on planet Earth, everybody. The Arctic Monitoring and Assessment Program issued that warning yesterday. What does that mean? I sent you a story about that one day. What do you think? Hey, George was sending you much love. He's the reason I'm here. It sure is. I love you, George. 43% of millennials, according to the American Worldview Inventory Survey, don't know, care, or believe that God exists. Wow. Now, comparatively, Generation X, low, born between 65 and 83, 70% consider themselves Christian. 79% of baby boomers, 46 to 1964. And it's just continuing to decline. What a drop off. What do you think about that? What does that say about our society, everybody? Let's get to some good news with the anointed Pastor Tisha Williams, the pastor of the First Baptist Church in Bridgehampton, New York. Of course, a beach colony. Girl.
Yes. Yes.
The folks are coming.
A beach colony, a beach town, and that's actually what we're going to be talking about today, a little bit of water. Hope is in the air. Hope is in the air. I want to hang my hat here in the book of Job, chapter 14, verses 1 through 2 and 7 through 10. It reads, mortals born of woman are of a few days and full of trouble. They spring up like flowers and wither away like fleeting shadows. They do not endure. But at least there is hope for a tree. If it is cut down, it will sprout again, and its new shoots will not fail. Its roots may grow old in the ground, and its stump will die in the soil. Yet at the scent of water, it will bud and put forth shoots like a plant. I'm reminded of a story I heard about a couple, a woman named Diana, who had only 24 weeks pregnant, had to undergo an emergency cesarean to deliver their new daughter, Dana Lou Blessing. When she was born, she was only 12 inches long, and only weighed 1 pound. So they already knew that she was perilously premature. And the doctor's words dropped like bombs as they said, I don't think she's going to make it. There's only a 10% chance she'll survive through the night. And even then, she'll be left with super deficiency. Her future could be a very cruel one. And as if willed by Diana's determination, Dana clung to life hour after hour. When Danae turned 2 months old, her parents were able to hold her in their arms for the very first time. And today, she's a petite little feisty young girl. And on one afternoon, Danae was sitting in her mother's lap in the bleachers of a ballpark where her brother Dustin's baseball team was practicing. And as always, she was chattering up a storm nonstop when all of a sudden she went quiet. And hugging her arms across her chest, little Danae said, do you smell that? Smelling the air and expecting an approaching thunderstorm, her mother said, yeah, it smells like rain. She said, no. Do you smell that? Once again, her mother said, yes, I think we're about to get wet. It smells like rain. She said, no, it smells like him. It smells like God when you lay your head on his chest. Why do I tell this story? Because it so closely mimics Job's story in this text. When we find him, he too is fighting an affliction, fighting for life. He's lost everything, and now to add insult to injury, he suffers the proverbial faithful wounds of his friends as they offer little comfort and plenty of bad theology. In short, he is low. And we can all relate to Job in this moment being low. And not just in this moment, perhaps like so many, you've been low for months, over a year, wondering, what is God doing? It makes you wonder, are we too the dupes of a divine roll of the dice? Here, Job declares mortals born of woman are a few days and full of trouble. Fighting the pandemic of COVID-19 has birthed trouble. Law enforcement officers are causing trouble. I'm sorry to the late Congressman John Lewis, but we now even lack the energy and the bandwidth to even make good trouble. And you're wondering right now, is there more trouble on the horizon? We are the literal personification of a few days filled with trouble. And when we find ourselves in trouble, we often feel helpless. Job feels like there's no hope for him, and yet he declares there's still hope for a tree. It begs the question, Santita, what does the tree know that we don't? Here's what's interesting. Trees and humans have a symbiotic relationship. Humans exhale CO2, which trees needed to thrive, and trees release oxygen, which humans need to thrive, which means if there's hope for a tree, then there's hope for me. One more time. If there's hope for a tree, then there's hope for me. That's your meditation today. The text says, at the scent of water, the tree will bud and put forth shoots like a plant. Why? Because at the scent of water, the tree is reminded of the power of water and its connection to it. Water means life. Water means power. Water brings healing. At the presence of hope, at the scent of water, hope is in the air. That's good news, because this is where we find the power of scent. Memories triggered by scent have some of the strongest emotional connections there are. Let me prove it. You may never remember a face or a name, but a scent is something you will never forget. The scent of fried chicken can take you right back to your grandmama's kitchen. The scent of books take you right back to your first grade school library. The scent of a perfume or cologne, Lord have mercy, can take you right back to a lover's arms. My friend and candlemaker Rafi says, it's not about the scent, but rather the recall of a moment. A scent triggers a memory, and that memory becomes a manifestation. The roots may grow old in the ground, and the stump may die in the soil, but at the scent of water, it will bud and put forth shoots like a plant. As the root responds, a memory becomes a manifestation. What are you saying, Tish? I'm saying that when the trunk is chopped down, when the stump is dead, at the scent of water, the root is still alive and will respond. I wish somebody could declare today that I'm yet still alive. You may feel hopeless today, but at the root of it all, there is still life. At the scent of water, the tree senses a shift in the atmosphere from death to new life. At the scent of water, barrens bud. At the scent of water, what is shut down shoots forth. At the scent of water, not even at the full immersion, sometimes all you need is the promise of the blessing to know that God is near. Let me help you. I learned that contrary to popular belief, most root systems don't grow deep. They grow wide. You see, as believers, we're often encouraged to dig deep in times of crisis, but sometimes we don't have the energy to go deep. We don't always have the strength to go deep. But to put it plainly, it's just too hard. Maybe the tree is teaching us that the source of our hope is not always found in depth, but rather in reach. Father, I stretch my hand to thee. You may be cut down, withered, dried up, and presumed dead, but what's inside of you will respond to the water. He said, I am the living water. So today I invite you to respond to the call of the living water. Come unto me, all ye that labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Do you smell that, Santita? Hope is in the air. And that's the good news.
Amen, 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 amen. And aren't we mostly water as human beings?
Yes, we are.
Just like the world is mostly water. In fact, the same configuration of the earth, water to landmass, is the same flesh to human. We are mostly water, everybody. Wow. Thank you for that. Thank you.
Thank you.
I needed that today. I want you to stay right here. We've got Dr. Deborah Holden, and we're going to have Dr. Shanina Knighton at the bottom of the hour. But you know, we bring on Dr. Deborah Holden because we have to get a little time with this brilliant epidemiologist all to ourselves. That's right. Before she goes someplace else. Of course, she's the Associate Dean of Public Health at Michigan State University. I want to ask you about this, Dr. Deborah Holden. Of course, you know me. I'm up at 2 in the morning. Don't say anything. I'm trying to get to a place where I get more sleep. Stop. Just, okay. Because sleep is important, everybody. We're finding that when you overwork, you lessen your chances not just of a healthful life, but you shorten your lifespan. So that's very important. But I wanted to ask you about this Kaiser study that showed something kind of surprising. Not 40% of Americans are fully inoculated, are fully vaccinated. That having been said, Asian Americans, 41%. Native Americans, indigenous people, 45%. Whites, 33%. Hispanics, 29%. Blacks, 22%. Wow. Now, overall, even with this tremendous campaign to get people these shots, there's resistance, but no more than in the black community. I was really surprised by those numbers, although several friends of mine told me that I shouldn't be. But what do you make of that? 22%?
Are those their numbers in their patient population?
I guess so. Kaiser, yeah.
Well, that's it. So I'd be more interested in looking at, and I haven't checked because the numbers change quite often, what it looks like in the general population. You know, I always think of it this way. Different people have different barriers for access or different, sort of underpinnings around, hesitancy or information, et cetera. When you get into a particular patient population, you got to think about what are the nuances of that patient population. So I don't know because I haven't checked recently what the numbers are nationally. I do know that African Americans still lag behind, but like in my community, when we talk to people, mostly the lag behind is an access problem. It isn't a I don't want it or a, and then there are legitimately people who are saying, I'm still trying to figure it out. But I would take that a little bit with a grain of salt because Kaiser is a difficult system to navigate. The people who love it, but the people who don't. And oftentimes that's your choice of insurance. It is strange, though. I'll take a little bit of a deeper look at it and give you some better reflection.
Please do, because I think also there's just a general narrative in which I realize, we just found out that there are 9 new vaccine billionaires, the heads of these companies. This crisis has given us 9 new billionaires. It's unbelievable. $19.3 billion they are now worth on the back of this pandemic, of this tragedy, right? And so we gave them the money to make these vaccines. They really assumed no risk. And you have the biggest salespersons in the world, all the heads of state and the media selling it. And why are black people in particular and black and brown people being targeted to take this shot? And I don't see the same kind of campaign for whites, even though they're more hesitant than black people are, according to different studies.
Yeah, this is a tricky topic because initially we saw African Americans got hit harder, right? We were overrepresented in cases, and I think a big part of that is because we didn't have the same luxury of being able to shelter in place the way that a lot of other people did, right? We're overrepresented in the kinds of high demand, low wage jobs where you can't just convert over to Zoom and do it from home. In multiple reasons. And then we were overrepresented also in death, so in hospitalizations, right? Things like pre-existing health conditions and housing and stress and all these other things. And so it makes sense to me, and I sort of warned our community, we shouldn't be peddling or pushing any particular vaccine. People don't think of it as the single dose. They think of it as the J&J. They think of it as a brand, not a dose. That's what J&J is. It's the single dose. So trying to get a single dose vaccine to places where people have more barriers coming back for the second shot or are reluctant in the first place. I know some people who didn't do so well with the first shot and then had to sort of be convinced to go back to get the second shot. You remember your dad got his first shot and then he got sick. And it's sort of like, what do you do if that happens?
Well, he after he got well, he got the shot because he, as you say, trusts the science. And quite frankly, it was a debate in our family because we were like, wait a minute now, you've not been sick like this before. And so, but he's actually doing well now. But still, I appreciate you giving your credentials. Reverend Williams, I think it's so important that she is so open. She comes out of Johns Hopkins. She works with the CDC, all of that. And she does not treat us like we are stupid. I mean, you respect our intelligence, our experiences, and that's why we need people like Dr. Deb in her position, and she needs to be exalted even more because we need people who not who look like us, because there are a whole bunch of people who look like you who don't think like you. White, black, brown, yellow, or red. I want some people who understands the underdog. How about that? That's where I am with that. Don't exalt color. Understand and appreciate
30.
kind. All your color is not your kind. Think about that. We're going to be talking about preventing infection with infection preventionist Dr. Dr. Shanina Knighton and Dr. Deborah Fur holding it down for us on the
15.
Santita Jackson Show. 773-763-WCPT, 773-773-9278. What questions do you have about COVID-19? And what do you think about this ceasefire in the Middle East? Have we gotten peace or just calm? Back in just a minute. You know
Wow.
what? Yeah, well, okay. Your comments, Reverend Williams, First Baptist Church, Bridgehampton. Now I know there's a church I can go to in the Hamptons. Thank you.
Yes, for sure, without doubt. I echo your sentiments about Dr. Verholden that, you know, we need you. We need your voice. We need your expertise, and we need your willingness to tell the truth and give us information that we otherwise may not have access to. So I appreciate you.
And you know what, Pastor? The openness to our questions. See, because even when you disagree, Dr. Deborah Verholden, you are open to our questions. You appreciate our experience, and you say, "Hey, you know what? I think you're off base here. This is what you need to consider." You don't treat Big Mama and Pookie and Santita and Maria and Billy Bob, et cetera, as people who ought to be called anti-vaxxers, because we're very, very dangerously close into, I think, a space where you're going to have people literally fighting in the streets. Are you vaxxed or not?
Yeah.
And people are going to lie about being vaccinated, just like they have lied about having not had COVID-19.
Yeah.
A lot of people have it, and they won't tell you, or they've had it because they're embarrassed. Haven't you? Has that been your experience, Pastor?
It has been my experience, not in terms of lying. What I'm struggling with, and I actually had a conversation.
We have Dr. Knighton
recently. Is just how do we make this determination? I'm truly frightened about creating a more separate church, or people not feeling welcome, or just creating a divide. I'm very concerned about that, which is, again, as I've said, is the exact opposite of what I've been called to do. I've been called to be inclusive, not exclusive. And I don't think there's any, my job is to do no harm. And I don't know that there is a way to avoid harm by considering who has a vaccine and who doesn't, and who can come back and who can't. That is it's a slippery slope. It's just dangerous, and I don't like it.
It's not healthy for us. Well, we've got Dr. Shanina Knighton. Why don't you listen to this conversation? Pastor, stay there and listen, because Dr. Shanina Knighton, she was brought to us, thankfully, of course, by Dr. Deborah Verholden. She said, "I have someone you need to meet, and we need to help her get known out here." I mean, Dr. Knighton.
Well, after the conversation the other night, Dr. Knighton has me canceling my barbecues and everything. I'm like Dr. I'm like Attorney Hall. I'm like spraying people in the face. I'm like, oh God, I'm disinfecting this phone and everything. She can't be straight.
She sounded like my grandma Gertrude, God rest her soul. Honey, you had to drop your suitcase in her garage before you walked in her house.
30.
And you had to take your clothes off the door, and she had sheets, so you go and take a shower, take a bath, not a shower, a bath, as soon as you got to her house. And she didn't want that nasty Chicago.
15.
She said in her house. Oh my gosh. Oh
yeah,
gosh.
I'm straight, Dr. Knighton.
Dr. Knighton, you there?
Yes, good morning.
Dr. Deborah Verholden.
I'm here.
Stay right there.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
Determined, unstoppable, achieving the impossible. We're standing tall with our heads held high. We are victorious.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Santita Jackson Show. It is Friday, May 21st. The Santita Jackson Show. What a joy it is to be with you today here. It's a beautiful day. We're going to have a high of 83 degrees in Chicago. It will be partly cloudy, but beautiful. Minneapolis, St. Paul, a high of 81 degrees and showers. And oh my gosh, it really feels like the weather is broken. Maybe I should put my sweaters away. Mm, not on your life, not till June, honey. That's how I roll in Chicago because I never know what's going to happen. But let's talk about COVID-19, and thank you, Dr. Deb, Associate Dean of Public Health at Michigan State University. And we've got Pastor Tisha Dixon Williams just holding on and really listening to this conversation because she has a congregation. She's talking to people. This is someone you brought to us, Dr. Deborah Furholden. After meeting her and after hearing her presentation, after hearing her depth of knowledge and experience, you were so impressed with her, you really wanted her to get on this show and on other platforms. Why, Dr. Furholden?
The unicorn is why. First of all, I did not even know that, and I know there are people who focus on sort of infections and disease prevention, but this particular specialty around infection prevention, the fact that there's so few of these people who are certified across the country. Dr. Knighton made a really great point the other day, which, Dr. Fauci is a, renowned immunologist and scientist, et cetera. But that's very different from having the insight and the knowledge on how to prevent the spread of infection on a day-to-day basis. People like Dr. Knighton have been up to this well before COVID. She's been in primary care settings and in hospital settings trying to figure out, how many people get sick at the hospital? My mother went to the hospital for a wound and got MRSA, multi-resistant staph aureus, that resulted in her having to get a PICC line installed in her arm that went straight to her heart to deliver her IV antibiotics. She acquired that infection in the hospital. I live in Flint. You know how many infections are spread in the hospital? Can you imagine your loved one goes to the hospital for a heart transplant or some other type of surgery or treatment and picks up an infection in the hospital, and a lot of people die from those infections. So this specialty around infection prevention, I feel like we also need to elevate that because look at what we experienced with our flu season this year. All of these COVID precautions, and don't get me wrong, we're going to have to figure out what, our sort of return to normalcy will look like. But this is an area that we need to elevate, and it gets elevated by highlighting and showcasing the people who do the work and giving them a platform to bring those messages forward. The very first session that we were in together, she was saying things, and I'm thinking, wow, even my knowledge and insight as an epidemiologist, I'm thinking from a community level, a population level, structural, and she's thinking about those things as well as person-to-person spread. So I think we could all benefit from having a Dr. Knighton in our corner.
And that is why she's here, everybody, because she said, you have got to talk to her. No, Santita. I mean, like right away. And she is not disappointed. But Dr. Deborah Verholden, wealth of knowledge. And in fact, she is committed to really making us literate. And we're going to be talking about that going forward. Pastor Tisha Dixon Williams is still with us. Dr. Shamina Knighton, I want to know, you are an infection preventionist. Explain what that is and why that is relevant, in a pandemic.
Okay. Good morning, everybody. So an infection preventionist, hi. So an infection preventionist we are professionals, okay, who are typically healthcare workers that are committed to making sure that the spread of pathogens, which could be deadly bacteria, viruses, or fungus, doesn't spread from healthcare workers to patients, from patients to patients, from patients to visitors, and just even through the environment. And so typically this profession was started in the 1970s, and it was by a group of nurses. So we're talking about a group of individuals that felt that there was a need in order to be able to decrease infections. So what this entails is no, we cannot prevent the bugs that are here, but we can prevent the bugs from spreading. So my research has been committed to not only just focusing on healthcare workers, because I'm sure many of us have been told, oh, make sure your healthcare workers clean their hands. But the one thing that hasn't been paid attention to is how do we teach patients to self-manage their infection prevention? And like Dr. Deb mentioned, you know, even when her mom went into the hospital, the fact that no one said, hey, we are here to treat you and take care of you, but there is also a risk that you can get one of these types of infections, such as MRSA. Make sure that you clean your hands. Make sure that someone is wiping down your bed rails. No one was given that advice. And so I've been committed to studying that. And so even something as little as that towelette that comes on a patient's tray, that towelette in itself is not necessarily going to mitigate infection. Like, it's not going to stop them from being able to get sick. It's just a lemon towelette. So it hasn't been studied for its effect to even be able to remove pathogens. But we know that when we're talking about these deadly bugs, we need more than just a lemon wipe. And
wait. It's just a lemon wipe.
It's a lemon wipe. It is just a lemon wipe to remove the physical debris from your hands. But if you encounter MRSA, that friction may remove some germs, but it's not going to remove pathogens from your hands. And unfortunately, when you're in the hospital, that's the only thing you're being given on a tray. That's it.
Lemon wipe.
Yes. And then if you're older or you have dexterity issues, you may struggle with being able to open it up.
Yeah.
So it's
okay.
Yeah, so it's a challenge.
My doctor doesn't even want me to go to the hospital and has not wanted me to go for years. And I mean, and doctors increasingly want you in and out of the hospital. They said they are like infection spreaders. No disrespect, but even those who clean in the hospitals, especially, they should be trained in this. And I don't see it happening. I mean, and you know what? The World Health Organization has called for better hand hygiene and other infection control practices. You are right. You are on to something. That just came out earlier this month. Their latest global survey on implementation of national infection prevention and control programs highlights what they call an urgent need to reduce inequalities in the availability of good hand hygiene. I mean, how, just around the world, how much access do we have to the means of having hands that are hygienic, Dr. Knight?
So the one thing that I do, many people don't recognize this, but May 5th is World Hand Hygiene Day. So it is the day where literally we take a pause and we appreciate the fact that some of us can wash our hands, and we try to do our best to provide resources for those that can't. But I tell people that the one thing that many take for granted, it's almost like a business that wants to start up. Like, people will say you need seed money, right? But I would always say, well, who got the dirt to plant my seeds? And so it's the same thing when we're talking about water. So when we're talking about hand hygiene, whether we're talking about the friction with soap, if I don't have clean water, access to clean water, really, how can I clean my hands? If I do have access to clean water and I have soap, am I washing my hands adequately for the 20 to 25 seconds? Am I cleaning where the thumb meets the hands? Am I cleaning my fingernails? Am I scrubbing where my wrists are? There are many areas that people forget, and unfortunately, only 3 to 6% of the population cleans their hands correctly. I was even yesterday at a restaurant, okay, and I was just going in there for some grapefruit juice. And when I tell you the lady again, she put her hands inside of my cups with her gloves on, and I asked her to change it. She was like, I didn't put my hands in your cup. I said, ma'am, I said, this is what I do for a profession, and I just washed you. I said, so if you please can take your hands out of the cup and get me another cup, please. And it's not trying to be mean, but what I'm expressing is the same way that patients experience healthcare workers getting mad when they tell their healthcare workers to clean their hands, because it does happen. It's the same way that if you ask somebody out in public to clean their hands, they are going to have a fit. They're going to have an attitude. They're going to be very upset. And unfortunately, this is something that we need to change, because many of these individuals don't realize you are going to be a patient in another setting. You're going to be doing something else in another setting that's going to require you to depend on somebody else to make sure that they are practicing infection prevention correctly. So it is very important that this is something that we all start to think about, including as things open up. So things are getting ready to open up, and we're getting ready to, again, be back to, we see the environmental cleaning has been rolled back. So you never know if the elevator button that you're touching is contaminated. You don't know if the escalator rail that you have to go down and hold on to securely is going to be contaminated. You don't know if the stair rails are going to be contaminated. The air. There's so many things that you're going to come across, and no, this is not to precipitate fear. It is to make sure that you are empowered and saying, you know what, I'm cleaning my hands when touching outside surfaces. Check. I'm making sure that I'm cleaning my cell phone at least twice a day. Check. I'm making sure that when I'm at the grocery store, I'm conscious about how I set my items down on the counter. I'm conscious that if the lady had on gloves during checkout and she checked my items out, she also touched everybody's items before my items, who also touched their items too, and that there is an accumulation of germ buildup on those gloves. And if she's not changing those gloves and practicing proper hand hygiene, I consciously understand that those potential contaminants are on my items. And so maybe I should consider wiping them down, or consider them contaminated just how we would our clothes when we make it inside of our homes. So there are these things that we may not necessarily think about, but I just want to tell people, like, yes, and Dr. Deb has said it multiple times, the vaccine is a tool in our toolkit. Hand hygiene is a tool in our toolkit, and really essential. It's been here since the beginning of time. Same thing with masks. Masks are a tool in our toolkit. Physical distancing, tool in our toolkit. Access to clean air, meaning that you are in somewhere where there are air exchanges or you're in outside air. These are tools in our toolkit. And so I want to remind people that as these guidelines are being rolled back and they're saying, oh, don't get more tests. You don't need tests once you're vaccinated. Oh, you don't need to wear a mask anymore. I'm reminding people that just like the flu vaccine wears off, my concern is that this COVID-19 vaccine is going to wear off, but because we've gotten out of the habit of testing, because we've gotten out of the habit of just evaluating certain things, how do we know that the individuals that are vaccinated are still not going to suffer from some of the long-term effects? And for the ones that are suffering from the long-term effects that have not been vaccinated, are their symptoms going to be worse? So in order for us to look at these things, and in order for people to take care of themselves, I encourage people, continue to practice prevention because it's better than treatment. You don't want COVID at all.
No, and what did you say in your social media post yesterday?
I expressed that I don't want COVID, and with or without a vaccine, I don't want you to get COVID either.
Dr. Deb, that was so, and Pastor Williams, that was so powerful to me. Dr. Deb, why did the CDC announce that they would no longer be tracking infections among fully vaccinated people unless they resulted in death or hospitalization? Why would they do that now? I mean, you don't have 40% of us in the United States who are fully vaccinated. I mean, and it was my understanding over the past year that we're pushing for herd immunity, 70, 75%, maybe even 80%. Dr. Fauci said at one point. We're not nearly there. Why only track vaccinated people if they are hospitalized or if they die?
I don't know if that's what's happening. I think what's happening is they're considering the metric of success, the breakthrough case, that there could be breakthrough cases, but that those breakthrough cases, and even some of them that show up to the hospital, are very mild cases. So I think what they're saying they keep an eye towards is the breakthrough cases that end up in the hospital that are severe cases or that result in death. I don't think you can get away from, when you say tracking, the cases are what they are. It's just what they're turning their eye toward and their attention toward. So it's interesting because it does feel like a little bit that we're changing what we're saying really matters. Remember, so when the vaccine originally came out, people were sort of thinking that this would be the thing that would get everybody back to normal. But then we said, well, wait a minute, you still possibly could transmit, or you even could become infected yourself. The likelihood of that goes way, 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 way down. And I still maintain if you were to contract COVID, you'd rather contract it vaccinated than unvaccinated. But it goes back to what Dr. Knighton is saying, which is that prevention still remains our best strategy. And I was very forthcoming when the CDC relaxed the mask guidelines with no context and no real meat on the bone. I said, I don't agree with this. And I still don't agree with it. In my community, I think the national is about 50%. We're well below that in my community. And our rates are moving at a snail's pace. We go up about 1% each week in complete vaccinations and new vaccinations. That's going to be a real slow pace to get to herd immunity because we're at about 35% fully vaccinated and about 45% have had at least one dose or are partially vaccinated. If we continue to move at the rate of 1% per week, we're not going to get there. We're not going to get to that sort of level of community protection. And so I don't want to be out around unvaccinated people or not even unvaccinated, people that just aren't honoring these protocols right now. Yesterday, literally, my daughter called me in upset. She went to get her vaccine and she's pregnant. I've, told everybody how excited I am about being a grandma. She's pregnant. She went to a kid's birthday party over the weekend. The kid had 3 friends. They did it in a, hotel with a, big room, and they took the kids to the pool at the hotel. The kid's father came on Sunday to wish his son happy birthday, and he tested COVID positive yesterday. Him and his whole household had symptoms. So my daughter called me in panic. Mom, I just realized I was exposed. You told me I should have done this earlier, but it was her decision, and she got there. And she said, what should I do? I'm scheduled to get my vaccine at 11. I said, you need to go get a rapid test first. And she said, something told me when I made my appointment to just kind of stay put, but it's her godson. And she wanted to go and be around him and celebrate with him. And guess what? The dad is doing very, very bad with his COVID. He looked fine on Sunday when she saw him. Mind you, she didn't interact with him. She didn't hug him. But of course he hugged his son. Of course she may have hugged him at the end of the weekend. So, people are still getting infected. People have just sort of taken their foot off the gas, and they're relaxing the protocol. And this confusing recommendation from the CDC is now being used as a tool by governors to pretend as if we don't need masks anymore. And really what they were trying to do was to create our fully vaccinated to be able to engage with other fully vaccinated people in a more relaxed way. But they gave no context for it.
You know what they're doing? They're responding to the public question about, okay, I've been vaccinated. Why haven't things changed for me? And I'm responding to what the National Nurses United, which is the largest nursing union in the country, they're concerned about the CDC tracking and how they track infections. This is coming from them. They have a list of concerns. That's one of the concerns. But you know what? Let me bring Pastor Williams into this because she's got some real life concerns as a pastor who's looking at people opening up. You've been worshiping virtually, and eventually there will be the demand, I'm sure, from your congregation. Okay, well, can we come back in? What question do you want to ask Dr. Knighton or Dr. Deborah Holden?
I really, and that is the concern as we look to coming back, and people are getting antsy and they are getting itchy. As you guys know, I'm in a beach town. My main concern right now is just, as you've expressed, sort of the lax attitude around wearing masks. My concern is that in an area that is so small and how rapidly and exponentially our population numbers will grow over the next 3 months, what can we do beyond what we've already been doing? Is there something else, just one little small, simple thing that we can do to prevent perhaps seeing a spike come fall?
I've got about 4 minutes left. Dr. Deb, I'm going to give you a minute. I'm going to give 2.5 to, it's not rich, to the infection preventionist. Dr. Deb? Dr. Deb, are you on mute? What? Oh.
You know I am being brilliant, too. I was being brilliant. Right on mute. Look, in these Zoom times, that's the new expression. Can you hear me? Or you're on mute.
Oh, yeah.
Most commonly said statement in COVID. You're on mute. So what I would say, Pastor, is I would, one, encourage your congregants to continue to practice prevention. Because the problem is people will come from outside. And when you're in a beach town, when people are coming to the beach town in the summer, they're coming to turn up. They're coming to let their hair down and let their mask down. What they do is they create excess exposure risk for all the people in those communities. So I think it's important that the people in those communities acknowledge that and continue to practice prevention, because you will be at elevated risk when you get this influx of people who are outside of your community, who've come to your community to live their best life. So that's the one thing. The second thing that I would say is you, as the leader of that congregation and the person sort of, responsible for whatever you bringing people back in together might bring, monitor the trends in your community. There's good, the idea that you said we're going to do kind of like a phased reopening is a good thing, because it gives you the opportunity to understand what do we need to do. And it's one thing to sort of have a well-laid plan. It's something else when the rubber actually meets the road, right? So I always say plan your work and work your plan, but included in that plan should be when we might have to dial things back. And I think you want to calibrate that expectation for people. And I'd be happy to share with you some guidance that we've created both for churches and for schools in our community. It gives you sort of the benchmarks of this is that if things continue this way, we continue moving forward. But if we hit this critical point right here, community case rates go to this point, or we have an outbreak at our site, then this is what happens. Because that way you can avoid upset, because people know what's going to happen.
I'm going to connect the two of you. And, maybe we need to do something bigger, broader for people who have churches, who are attending churches, who have groups, sororities, fraternities, all of that. Because, look, people are coming back out. They're coming back together. And there's a lot of confusion. The last 2 minutes belong to you, Dr. Knighton.
So, yes, I was going to say it's actually interesting because the church community was one of the first communities that I engaged with to be able to share best practices, because, again, people were in denial about whether or not they should still meet. And just thinking about, of course, I know I express all the time, like outside air is the best air. But if someone is on the inside, doing certain practices, such as, just as I mentioned, making sure that the windows are open. Everyone, like the greeters coming inside of the church, make sure that they are greeting everyone with a squirt of hand sanitizer to make sure that they're cleaning their hands. Make sure that the doorknobs are being wiped down frequently. A frequency of once an hour is pretty good. In terms of like the Bibles and the hymnals and stuff, they should not be shared. And if, let's say, for example, it is a Sunday to Sunday time frame, you don't have to go through and clean the hymnals and the Bibles after everyone has used them, because if it's Sunday to Sunday, the virus is likely going to be dead by Sunday, because it's not going to survive that long on those particular surfaces. So sometimes people are wiping down things overkill, not realizing that it's not going to survive that number of days. The other piece that many don't talk about is when talking about treating the air. There are things such as peroxide, such as alcohol, that can kill the concentration of viruses, bacteria, and fungus that's in the air. So even if you took a misting spray bottle and you did half and half solution and you misted it in the air, it can kill some of the droplets that are in the air, and it's something that's not going to be toxic to people. So I also recommend that. The other
30.
piece of it is that for individuals that are coming in, it's okay for you to do a daily attestation before they show up. Have you been around someone with COVID? Do you know someone that is
15.
have a pending test? Do you know of anyone that has these symptoms?
10.
Asking those questions go a long way, because unfortunately not everyone is going to think
5.
about them. And then at some point, not everyone is going to be honest until it's too late. So remember, prevention is better than treatment.
Absolutely. And you know what, everybody? Take the scarlet letter off of people's chests. It's a virus. It can become a disease. But stop treating people like they need to be cast aside if they do have COVID. Come on, everybody. Let's treat everybody well. Let's get through this together. The Middle East coming up on the Santita Jackson Show. Back in a minute. Thank you all so much. Pastor, I know you hadn't expected to be on today, but I get inspired.
No. This is fantastic, and thank you so much for your advice. One of the things that we already have decided is that anything that was paper or manual is now going to be digital. So we're converting everything into a QR code. So it's really going to be a tap your phone kind of place.
Well, you know what?
Those Bibles won't be shared at all.
But to encourage people to clean their phones is a big deal, right?
Yeah.
It is. Yeah. The other piece of it, too, I was going to say, and I always want to bring this up just because this is why I started definitely getting out in the community with education materials, is understanding the digital divide that exists, the digital literacy issues that exist, and also, too, just even the fact that, when the CDC and WHO rolled out the guidelines, the font is too small sometimes, even on a cell phone, to be able to read it, and having a pension and read it in and all of those other things can be cumbersome. So I get it. Paper might be a nuisance, but I can tell you that disposable sheets of paper, or just as I mentioned, rotating papers in every, several days would be helpful, because the virus is not going to survive on that paper for that long period of time.
Mm-hmm.
Well, but this is stuff these are things that we just don't know, and so please, I mean, you're not a broken record. Let us know, because we don't know.
Yeah,
we really don't know these things.
No, I get it. Yeah, no, absolutely, I get it, and I think that is the big thing. I was seeing overkill happen, meaning that I was even in the church community. It was, we having somebody come in and clean 3 times a week, and they're getting ready to do this, and they're getting ready to spray. And I am saying that there is a such thing as too much, or where it becomes not effective at all. Because the thing is we can clean something, but if we go touch it again, and it can get back dirty. And so there is this thing of where it can reduce the load. So we can reduce the bacterial and the viral load, which means that the millions and millions of these things that would accumulate on something, we can reduce that load, but we can't necessarily eliminate it. So it is those measures that can take place as well.
Do you all want to say anything else before we go? Before I move on to the next topic? I've got about a minute and a half before we go into the next topic.
We have Kevin Gray.
Okay.
Well, I think it's important that people, in line with what Dr. Knighton is saying, I always say this is not the time to do the most nor the least, right? And we have a tendency to do that. People do too much. Like Santita with her 8 layers of mask.
Yes.
You don't need 8 layers of mask.
Yes.
I need you to be able to breathe.
I can't.
Right? And so that's what I know, right? But that's doing the most, right? But then doing the least would be not wearing your mask, or, I see people with these little cloth things they put around, their necks, and they just wear them nonstop. They never wash them. They pull them down. They pull them back up. That's doing the least. So that's why people like me and Dr. Knighton are here, because we want to make sure that people can find that sweet spot of just what's right. And that's why when you're responsible for a workplace or a church, you do it in phases. You lay a well thought out plan, It's not overkill, but not underkill. And then you be willing to adjust and adapt as you go along. You'll learn a lot about how to do this in the process of doing it. You're prepared. Yeah. So, just find that sweet spot.
And run it by somebody like a Dr. Deb or myself, because I'm telling you, like, sometimes you be like, oh, if you don't need that, oh, this is actually something that you should consider thinking about as well. So even when somebody was mentioning that they was disinfecting their mask by spraying their mask down, and I'm like, you do realize that you're inhaling those chemicals and what that can do to your respiratory system, what that can do to your neurological system. And these are things that we don't think about. That on the back of the can, they say you're not supposed to inhale it, but you're going to put it right in the mask next to your mouth and your nose, where you just going to breathe the chemicals in because you don't think you smell them anymore, or you think that what you perceive as being that fragrant smell of clean is going to help you, but it's actually killing you. And it's crazy because allergies, and I'm waiting for somebody to pop up with the study so I can be a cheerleader. But I'm telling you, what's been happening with allergies this year is no surprise to me. Because I'm talking about people that's like, I ain't never had allergies before, all of a sudden having allergies. People that had allergies bad before was like, oh, they was actually mild. So I really am waiting to see what's going on with these phenomena.
Oh my goodness, that's right. Me and my 10 masks. Leave me alone, Deb. Thank you. I got them on, and girl, I was breathing heavily as I was toddling in my 4-inch heels the other night. Yes, I did. Just one of my best friends had a birthday party, and I saw those stairs. I said, "What? I got it. What?" I mean, because I had a couple of masks on. That's right, N95, honey, and then my sequin mask on top of it. Yes, with the filter in it. Mm-hmm. Could I breathe anything? No.
That is sad.
It's pitiful. It is.
That's sad to hear. I don't know if I want to get up this early. It's a sad story. That is sad.
I'll be quiet.
I can't. That is so sad.
Kevin needs to be quiet.
Wow.
Well, everybody, and he's got a fabulous barbecue restaurant. He's also the author of Killing Trayvon's an Anthology of American Violence.
Especially if you are in a space where it's your own, if it's family or somebody is getting ready to congregate, nothing is wrong with misting the air with the materials that I mentioned, just to be able to bring some of those droplets down so they don't stay suspended in the air. Because measures like that will help instead of having to layer up in all of those masks.
Well, I'm going to let Dr. Knighton and Dr. Verholden and Pastor Williams, I'm going to let you all go reluctantly. And, you're going to be hearing from Dr. Deb and I, because we have something we need all of you to do. We need to reach people so they can know what to do. I love you. I love you, my sisters, lovely ladies.
Yes, I love you too.
15.
Love you too. Have a great day, everybody.
Have a great weekend, everybody.
10.
Yes, you too.
Thank you, Santita, so much.
I love you.
5.
Thank you so much. Middle East, everybody. Want to hear what you
think? This is the Santita Jackson Show.
Determined, unstoppable, achieving the impossible. We're standing tall with our heads held high. We are victorious.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Santita Jackson Show. I'm Santita Jackson. It's a joy to be with you. It's Friday, May 21st, 2021. I am so glad to be with you today on the Santita Jackson Show. Let's talk about the Middle East crisis. There is a ceasefire. But is there peace? Is there calm? Let's talk about it. What do you think about American weapons that have been used in this conflict? And how do the American people, how have we shaped the dialogue? I want to talk with you, and I want to hear your thoughts. 773-763 WCPT, 773-763-9278. If you want to text me at that number, you can. GWC Entry Lawyers gives you the opportunity to do that. And I want you to meet my Morning Stars. Hi, the Santita Jackson Morning Stars over on Facebook. The Santita Jackson and Friends page, Santita Jackson and Friends, and of course WCPT 820, that Facebook page. And guess what? You can also like and subscribe to the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel. Yay! And meet me on Instagram at Santita Jackson IG and on what is it? Twitter at Santita J. That's the Santita J Show. That's right. Whew. It's a mouthful, everybody. It's a whole lot. Want to talk with you about the Middle East today. Want to talk with you. Want to hear what your thoughts are. What are your thoughts and what's next, everybody? What in 11 days we've had? It's been a lot. It's been a lot. A lot of people have died. A lot of people have been hurt, and America's at the center of it. So we got to talk about that on the Santita Jackson Show. So everybody, let's get to some of these headlines. Chicago, we're going to have a high of 83 degrees, partly cloudy. Minneapolis, St. Paul, 81 degrees. Showers today, everybody. The Dow closed up 188 points yesterday. The S&P 500 closed up 43 points. And NASDAQ closed up 236 points. Wall Street's roaring back. What about Main Street? The Twins 6, the Angels 3 yesterday. They will be facing off against Cleveland today. White Sox will be playing the Yankees, and the Cubs were triumphant over the Nationals 5-2. They'll be facing the Cardinals today. Everybody, we're going to be talking about Israel, Gaza, that conflict. The world is hailing leaders as we have a ceasefire after 11 days of attacks. We're going to be talking about that in just a few minutes. What do you think about that, everybody? As COVID-19 is ravaging nations all around the world, guess what? Big pharma executives have profited handsomely. This crisis has created 9 new billionaires. This is a new analysis. The People's Vaccine Alliance, a global coalition of public health and humanitarian organizations, have shown us that 9 newly minted billionaires have a combined wealth of $19.3 billion, enough to fully vaccinate all people in low-income countries 1.3 times. Wow. Moderna CEO Vancell and BioNTech's CEO Sahin have amassed the largest fortunes of the newly created billionaires, with wealth of 4.3 and $4 billion respectively. Wow. It just keeps on going. What do you think about that? Now, our government's paid for these vaccines to create them, but privately, people have gotten very wealthy. What do you think about that? Call me, text me, 773-763-WCPT. It's a real hotspot, this study that shows that the Arctic warming is 3 times faster than the rest of the Earth, everybody. The Arctic Monitoring and Assessment Program issued that morning on Thursday in a new report that summarizes the latest findings on Arctic change and projections of future transformations under different climate scenarios. That is not good news, everybody. And what's interesting is this. A survey of 43% of millennials don't know, care, or believe that God exists. That's right. What a fall off, everybody. Generation X, people born between 65 and 1983. 70% believe that God exists. 79% of baby boomers, 1946 and 1964. 83% of the builder generation. They believe it. But wow, what a fall off with children of today. What do you think is happening, everybody? That's something for us to talk about as we go forward. And everybody, this is the day, this is the moment in which we are celebrating hand hygiene. Are you engaged in that? The World Health Organization is calling for better hand hygiene and other infection control practices. Please take care of yourself. Take care of yourself. Let's get to the Middle East, everybody. We have got Kevin Gray, the author of Killing Trayvons, an anthology of American violence. You've read his work in Common Dreams and in The Progressives. You've read his book. You've read his work in The Nation. You've read his book, Killing Trayvons, the best-selling Killing Trayvons, an anthology of American violence. Let's talk with you, Kevin Gray, about this Middle East conflict. What happened, everybody? Now, let's bring that music down, Paul. Israel-Gaza conflict. Thank you so much. World leaders hail ceasefire after 11 days of attacks. Wow. And more than 1,300 Palestinians have been hurt. 230 have been killed. More than 60 children. 12 have been killed in Israel. Wow. What happened? It turns out Benjamin Netanyahu was called by President Biden, and President Biden pushed on a ceasefire. Initially, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu pushed back and said no. But something happened overnight, and now you've got Bernie Sanders, who's pushing, along with the squad, not to sell $735 billion worth of weapons to Israel. Now, this deal was cut before the current conflict. There's a lot. There are a lot of pieces. And then we're watching, quite frankly, Kevin, the whole discussion, the whole temperature completely changed. Now, you know, back in the day when you were helping to manage Reverend Johnson's campaign, you know, that was like the third rail. And it almost got him run out of politics to talk about Israeli security and Palestinian justice. And now that seems to be more, that almost seems to be like a mainstream Democratic Party idea. Welcome to the show, Kevin.
Good morning. You know, I think a lot of what has happened in this round of the conflict is that world attention was, and world public opinion was against Israel. Everybody is starting to call Israel an apartheid state. I mean, a lot of us have been calling Israel an apartheid state as long as we've been aware of the history. Back during the anti-apartheid movement in the 80s, we always linked Israel and South Africa. And in fact, most people that know the history of that region, know the history of South Africa and Israel, know that Israel helped South Africa produce its nuclear weapons. That's one of the things that no one ever talks about. And so, you know, when you look at what's happening today and world opinion, you had several countries that wouldn't unload Israeli goods, and we're starting to talk about expanding the boycott divestment movement, which a lot of lawmakers in America have tried to stop and tried to pass laws to say that you couldn't boycott or criticize Israel. America sells a lot of weapons to Israel, and America is what drives what goes on, a lot of the violence that goes on in the sale of weapons. And this, you know, you have to almost go back and look at the history of Israel since and Palestine since the end of World War II to really understand what's going on in the displacement of the Palestinian people. You know, Americans want, by most polls, want the United States to be neutral, but you know, with joint military operations, with having stockpiles of weapons in the Middle East, in Israel, with so many Christian Zionists in this country who believe that when the Jewish people take over all of Israel, then perhaps that signals the second coming of Jesus. You've got all this in the mix, but fundamentally it is an apartheid state. It's where one people, a permanent second. They're not. Well, I won't even call them second-class citizens. They're akin to the Native Americans here. They are victims of having their land taken over by settlers. I posted two words on my Facebook site the other day. I call it a settler colonialism, and people need to go look that up. But it's akin to manifest destiny. Manifest destiny is the concept in which the United States went westward and killed all the Native Americans that they came in contact with to seize that land. That is colonial settlerism. It's the same thing that the Boers did in South Africa. They went to South Africa and they killed everyone and took their land and imprisoned everybody else. That's settler colonialism, frontierism, where the settler has more rights than the indigenous people that live on the land. And I once gave a speech in D.C. and someone asked me, "Well, does Israel have a right to exist?" I said, "People have a right to exist. If you just think about the concept, does a country have a right to exist? Would America even exist? I mean, what does that mean? People have a right to exist, and people have a right to exist in a democratic structure. And to me, those are the best structures. And what you have in Israel now is not democracy. It's a ruling class and an oppressed class, and that oppressed class is locked into certain territories, and that's where they stay until the settlers take that territory."
We're talking with Kevin Gray, the author of Killing Trayvons, an anthology of American violence, a brilliant political organizer, the owner of Railroad Barbecue in Columbia, South Carolina. Let me not forget that. But you should get his book, Killing Trayvons, an anthology of American violence. And you should, of course, read him as he posts in The Progressive and The Nation and all of these wonderful, wonderful outlets. He does so much brilliant political analysis. Kevin Gray, where are we now? I mean, do we have peace or do we have calm or do we have quiet?
We have quiet. You have to. It's never been peaceful and it's never been calm since the resettling of Jewish people in Palestine since after World War II, and that's what it's about. And this idea of expanding Zionism. I said I posted two words, two concepts on my Facebook page and on my social media page. Zionism, which is a belief. Some of this, because it does get hard. I had a friend the other day, and she says to me, she's looking at what's going on in Palestine and Israel, and she says, wow. She says, the Jews. I said, no, that's incorrect. I said, you can't stereotype everybody. I said, it's the concept of Zionism, which is a political ideology, as much in the same way that the Germans believed in a superior race. You believe that you are God's chosen people, as some people believe that they are a superior race, as some people believe in manifest destiny. It is all the same thing.
Well, then be very specific, because I think that people do not realize that there is a real thriving. Number one, Benjamin Netanyahu, Prime Minister Netanyahu, is from the right wing of the spectrum, the far right. And you do have a thriving left wing and progressive wing in Israel that has a hard time getting heard too, just like we have a hard time getting heard in the United States.
Well, I mean, ultimately, even what people wonder why Trump is so popular. Well, everybody is wants to fight for their survival and to protect what they think is in the best interest of their race or their ethnic group. And when you talk about colonialism, and I said these are a lot of concepts that I know for early morning radio. When you talk about colonialism and white supremacy, which is all wrapped up together, you got a lot of huge left in America, but the foundation of America and the structures of America support the idea of white supremacy and the power behind white supremacy. As in Israel, you can have a huge left progressive community, but the fundamentals of the foundation of the country is on Zionism and protecting the rights of descendants of Jewish people and their descendants over everybody else.
What role did the American? They say that the BBC said been a tectonic shift in our attitudes toward the Middle East conflict, the Middle East situation. Well, the conflict. But indeed, the president has called himself a Zionist. And you don't have to be Jewish to be a Zionist. I think that people need to understand that. But he has declared that. He has every right to do that. That having been said, so he didn't take the natural position. It wasn't natural for him to say, no, I'm not going to call for a ceasefire. I think the American people pushed for that. Or do you think I'm incorrect?
I think that, as I said, when you look on social media, and maybe it's because I lean toward support of freedom movements, and I see the Palestinian movement as a freedom movement in the same way I saw the anti-apartheid movement as a movement. And the millennials aren't as wedded to, millennials X, Y, and Z aren't as wedded to those those old concepts that the politicians that are around Biden's age and they're just not buying it, especially in light of how they mobilized after the death of George Floyd and how they liken, especially black people liken how they have to deal with the police and have to deal with what power structure. They liken their experience to the experience of the Palestinians. So there's a whole lot of stuff online now that you can go find and find the history of Israel and Palestine, including that map that everybody publishes to show Palestinian land and from 1948 till the present and its erosion and the erosion of space. All that stuff is available now. They can't hide it. The internet has, to some degree, has leveled the information field. You can't just bomb a building and think the word is not going to get out. It gets out. And so I think that has a lot to do with it.
Everybody call me. Text me, 773-763-WCPT, 773-763-9278. Do you think this is over? Or do you think we just have a cessation in hostilities, right? I mean, do we have peace? Do we have calm? Or do we have quiet? Or do we have calm? Kevin Gray, the author of Killing Trayvon, an anthology of American violence, says, we don't have peace. We don't have calm. We have quiet. And I think, Kevin,
momentary quiet.
Momentary quiet. Okay. Where do you think this is going?
Lord, you're talking about big young kids don't believe in the Lord. Lord only knows. It has to be. I always support the one-state solution, and there are folks that support the two-state solution. I think a one-state solution is more democratic, and it would give the Palestinian people more rights than to have a two-state solution that's dependent upon Israel and the United States deciding what the Palestinian state will look like, and still being able to control that state as they are doing now with the territories. That's the only way out. Every time the UN and other nations challenge the illegality of what Israel is doing, the United States supports Israel. It's going to take a worldwide movement, such as was with South Africa, in which the Israeli government feels the economic pain for how they treat indigenous people in their own land. I think that's the only way that you can put pressure on Israel. That's the only way you can put pressure on most countries is to go at them economically. We're certainly not gonna go to war with Israel, and Israel is an ally. It's not going to be just as easy as the United States walking away, because, as I said, Israel is often a launching point and a listening point for the United States in the Middle East. Between Israel and Egypt, they get the lion's share of U.S. military aid. America is not going to walk away from that. Although I think our friend Matthew Ho wrote a piece about the U.S. pulling out of Afghanistan, where he mentions every time the United States has expanded its footprint in various countries, be it Yemen or the various countries in Africa or the Middle East, it doesn't slow down the growth of terrorist organizations or terrorist acts. It increases it. So we're going to have to take a whole new look at foreign policy and U.S. foreign policy, and the fact that it promotes war, and in fact, in some cases, it promotes terrorist groups to counter other terrorist groups. I mean, Hamas, when we were coming up, we didn't know what Hamas was, if it existed at all. We knew the PLO and Yasser Arafat, and it was a more secular organization. All of a sudden, Hamas comes to the fore, which a lot of people give Israel, the Israeli government, credit for creating Hamas, because they wanted Hamas to be a counter to the PLO. But the problem is Hamas is so linked to fundamentalist Islam and that's what we have now.
Well, you know what? We're going to have Dr. Jim Zogby with us in just a minute. The Arab American
1 minute.
Institute, indeed. So much of the sea change in thought about this conflict is due to his work. He was the deputy campaign manager for the Jackson campaign in '88 and one of Reverend Jackson's early supporters. Been pushing for this for a long time. Of course, Kevin was one of the officials in the Jackson campaign, both of them, as was Mr. Zogby. Let's talk about it. Pam and Rick and everybody else, going to get to your thoughts and your questions on the other side of the break.
The break. 30.
I'm Santita Jackson. Call me, text me at 773-763-927. Excuse me, 773-763-9278. 773-763-9278. I want to hear from you. What do you make of the Mideast conflict? What do you make of this cessation in hostilities?
10.
Is it calm or is it quiet? Back with more of the Santita Jackson Show in just a minute. Kevin Gray, thank you so much, Kevin.
How was that?
That was great. That was great. Thank you so much.
Tell Jim I said, hey, we're doing the and I'll send you Steve like this today. I got to get my crap together, but I'll be around.
Please do. I wonder if Mr. Zogby knows about this.
You be sure him tell him. Yeah, will you tell him that about Steve because we're doing the memorial. I think it's Sunday, and I'll send you the link. Yep.
Okay. Do you know what time on Sunday?
Oh God, I gotta look at it.
No. That's all right. Just send it to me because I'll certainly be there. I want to make sure Reverend is.
Yeah, because Reverend's participating. Yeah. Okay. Oh, he's participating. Okay. Yeah. Okay.
All right. Love you much. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
All right. Bye-bye.
Okay, is anyone there, Paul? I don't hear anything in the background.
Mr. Zogby's just putting in his earpiece. Just one moment.
Very good.
We have Mr. Zogby.
Mr. Zogby?
Hi.
How are you?
I'm okay. How are you?
I'm so glad that I'm honored that you're with me today.
Oh.
I'm so honored. We're on Facebook now, but we will be up on the radio in about a minute. But thank you so much.
Okay.
Kevin Gray was just with me, and he sends his love to you. And you know about Steve Cobble, of course.
Of course I do. Of course.
And they're having. I will send you the link to his memorial service. It'll be on Sunday. You know, it might be a lot for you to do, but you know, I certainly want you to.
Yeah.
Kevin said, you definitely got to tell Jim Zogby about that, obviously. So
yeah,
it's a lot. It's a lot.
I know. I was really shocked about Steve because she had been not just to me, but to my son Joe. Always speaks about the fact that when he worked under Steve at the campaign, he said, Dad, don't take offense at this. He said, but he was a role model for me. I learned so much from him. He really was just a very, not just smart, but such a gentle person.
Yes. Sweet human being.
A rarity.
Yes. I mean, gentle from just his soul, and then his spirit, and then his being, his demeanor. Just, God bless you. Just such a gentle spirit, in this rugged world of politics. But he was only willing to do the right things for the right reasons. That's it. That's it. And so, but I feel that way about you. And I just, no, I do. I mean, I just saw this crazy group of people who were just trying to do what was seemingly impossible 40 years ago. But you all have nudged the world more than a little bit, and I thank you for all your work. Thank you.
Thanks, Santita.
No, thank you.
15.
Okay, we're coming up in a hot second. And again, thank you so much for being with me today. It means so much.
Thank you.
And my mother sends her love
5.
to you.
Oh, good.
You know, she said, I just.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
Determined, unstoppable, achieving the impossible. We're standing tall with our heads held high. We are victorious.
I'm Santita Jackson. It's the Santita Jackson Show. You know, we are going to get there. We are victorious. Oh, just a little bit of a note. We have changed the dates of the Rainbow Push Convention. It's not going to be in June, but as soon as we get the dates reset, I'm going to let you know what they are. Let's talk about the Middle East. We've had, of course, Kevin Gray talking to us about whether what this ceasefire means, what this cessation of hostilities mean. A lot of people have been killed. A lot of people have been injured. Infrastructure in the hundreds of billions of dollars that has occurred in the Palestinian territories. What do you think about that, everybody? And it's been American weaponry that's been used, and so much of America's power and might, and Great Britain, by the way, that's important for us to understand as well. But you know, no one has worked harder to move the needle for Israeli security and Palestinian justice. No one has done more in the Palestinian world and in the broader Arab world and in our world to make it a more just society, a more humane society than this gentleman I have with me today. I'm so honored to have him here. This is Jim Zogby, everybody. James Zogby, the director of the Arab American Institute. Of course, I've known him practically all of my life, so honored that he's been a part of my life and watching his activism in an unpopular space decades ago. And yet he remained principled, he remained loving, and he's done that. He was the deputy campaign manager for the Jackson campaign, one of Reverend's early supporters, one of the early supporters in '83, before he ran the first time. And then, of course, he's evolved into becoming a counselor for Bill Clinton, President Bill Clinton, and then, of course, to Bernie Sanders. His activism has never, ever, 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 ever stopped. And so we're so honored to have you, James Zogby. Mr. Zogby on the show. You know I got to call you Mr. Zogby. That's what I've been doing all my life.
Yeah, I remember, making me think about back then. Yeah, you and so many others from that campaign who are now grown people called me Mr. Zogby. The one I remember, though, and I'll never forget, was Willie Barrow, who always called me Zogby. Zogby. What do you say, Zogby? And she's the only one I ever let get away with that. That was just love the way she said it.
Oh, because she's old enough. She's old enough.
One of the things you said about our tax dollars paid for this destruction, something that has troubled me as I think about it, that simply has never become a story and that no one has focused on, is that some of the destruction done were to projects paid for by our tax dollars. There's a desalinization plant in Gaza that supplied water for 250,000 people. Israel blew it up. We had paid for it with AID funding. They blew up the power plant. We paid for it with AID funding. And, I don't get the fact that there has been so little recognition of the fact that this was not self-defense. This was the destruction of the infrastructure that provided water, that provided power, that provided services, 17 hospitals and clinics, again, that we have helped support with funding, blown up. What was the point of this other than to punish people and force them into submission?
What happened here? How did this begin? I'm still mystified.
Well, I mean, one can trace the chicken egg going way back, but in the immediate, in the present moment, there were efforts on the part of Israel to continue a process of removing Arabs from East Jerusalem to make way for Jewish settlers. There is a law in Israel that says if property was owned by Jews before 48, it could be reclaimed by Jewish organizations and given to folks who are settlers. There are properties in East Jerusalem, the Arab part of Jerusalem, that were owned by Jews before 48, and they left and went to the West. But the people living on that land today have been there now for 73 years. They also had come from West Jerusalem and were forced to flee in 1948. Israeli law provides that Jews can go back to Jewish-owned property, but there's no provision for Arabs going back to Arab-owned property in Israel proper, because that would mean 700,000 Palestinians and their descendants could go back, which would, of course, fundamentally change the population of Israel. So this basically racist law was being applied, and Palestinians were given eviction orders. There were protests, and the Israeli police came in and they squashed the protests, and there was violence. And then coupled with that were efforts on the part of Israel to close off the area around the mosque in Jerusalem, Al-Aqsa Mosque, a plaza where Palestinian families, before the breaking of the fast, would sit and gather like a park in East Jerusalem. They closed it off with gates and the like, and again, there were demonstrations, and the Israelis used violence, pretty significant violence, shelling stun bombs and tear gas into the mosque itself when people took shelter. In the middle of all that, Hamas decided to get in the action and say, if you keep doing this, we're going to start rocket fire against you. I frankly think that was a stupid move on their part. The world was paying attention to Jerusalem, and it didn't need a distraction. But Hamas did what they did, and the Israelis responded as they do, with overwhelming and disproportionate violence, targeting civilians and infrastructure, and causing the kind of damage that they have caused. But that was the immediate, the sort of the proximate cause of what has transpired.
Is there any significance that this happened so close to Ramadan? In Ramadan?
Of course, it was because of the gathering outside of Al-Aqsa the week before the end of Ramadan, a very important time. That was a big issue. That was what really fueled a lot of the Palestinian unrest, was that here we are from the what is called the Evening of Light, a week before the end, as you know, we're approaching now the end of Ramadan. The gatherings had begun. It's what Muslims do after fasting all day and looking forward to the end of this period of fasting. And the Israelis decided to intervene with putting up gates and stuff to close off the area so Palestinians couldn't gather. They should have let it alone. They couldn't. Sometimes the Israelis cannot restrain themselves from being repressive. I mean, it's sort of like almost a need to demonstrate power and control. We see it in police departments around the country, where you look at what they're doing and they say, this is stupid. Why are you provoking a situation when it can be handled so differently? But when the culture of impunity and the culture of dominance takes over, people behave very badly. And because there's no adult supervision, there's no one to say, stop it or else, it continues.
What role does America have in all of this? I mean, and can America be an honest broker? Is it an honest broker?
No, we cannot be, and that's the tragedy of the situation. We ought to be. We should be. It was necessary that we be, but we aren't. And I've always, with this bill that has just come forward to provide $735 million in smart weaponry, precision weaponry, quote unquote precision, to the Israelis to basically replenish their supply. I've said for decades we've been the coat holder and cheerleader for one side. Now we also become the weaponry loader for that side, and the optics of it are horrible. The politics of it are terrible, and the morality of it is inexcusable.
Do we have peace? Do we have calm? Or do we have quiet?
I'm not sure we have any of the above, but what we have is a period when there won't be Israeli missiles being dropped on people in Gaza and Hamas rockets going off on the border. But has there been, as I wrote, I tweeted this last, with the announcement of the ceasefire, will Israel stop the evictions in Sheikh Jarrah? Will they stop the humiliation of Palestinians at checkpoints? Will they stop seizing land around Jerusalem and stop building the settlements that are currently being planned there? Will they end the strangulation of Gaza? If none of those things change, then we don't have peace. We have a kind of a moment of quiet before the tension builds again. If nothing has changed, then nothing has been accomplished, and I'm not sure that either on the American or Israeli sides that any lessons have been learned, and that's the difficulty here.
Why do you say that? I mean, what happened here? Because it seems that President Biden called I called the Prime Minister Netanyahu, and said, hey, we need a de-escalation immediately. And Prime Minister Netanyahu pushed back. I said, wait a minute, you've got a $735 million arms deal out here, and you're going to push back? We gave you $3.8 billion. Whoa, what is this? What's going on here?
A sense of impunity. I mean, Netanyahu said back in 2001, I think it was, before a Jewish audience in Israel, he was talking to them about pressure from the United States, and he's saying it didn't bother him because he knew how to control America. He knew how to run the process by using Congress against the president. He still feels that way, and so there is a sense of impunity. Look, if you think about it, we've been telling Israel don't build settlements now since they first started in the early 70s, and they keep building them. We threaten them; they keep building them. We say they're illegal, as we did up to the Carter administration, and they keep building them. If we have children and we brought them up in the same way, i.e., don't do this or there'll be consequences, and there were no consequences, you know what a little monster you'd end up raising, right? And without being patronizing, that has been the relationship with Israel. It's the only country that has zero sanctions against bad behavior, and the result is that they have become emboldened and operate with a sense of impunity that we can do whatever we want. No one's ever going to stop us. You have a vote at the UN of 183 to 3, and it's the U.S., Israel, and Micronesia who vote against it. The Israelis know as long as America is on their side, or at least will not oppose them, they can do whatever they want. Obama said settlements are illegitimate, but existing settlements are existing realities, and okay. So they know that if they build a settlement and we say, don't build it, don't build it, don't build it, the minute it's built, it becomes an existing reality and we accept it. I remember going with Clinton back in 98, and there was this hill between Bethlehem and Jerusalem called Jebel Abul Ghneim. It was a green space, the Israelis declared. It was Bethlehem property. They seized it and announced they were building a settlement. Clinton said, no. He was quite firm about the no. When we were there at Christmas time in 98, you could see the bulldozer starting to build the road that was going to go up to the top of the hill. Today, 22,000 people live there, and Israel has just announced building new homes for another couple of thousand people. As long as they can get away with it, they will continue to do it. Not because they're evil, but because they have learned that they can operate without restraint, and so why bother? And that's the problem. We are not almost constitutionally able to function as an honest broker or a source of restraint.
We're talking with James Zogby, the Arab American Institute. We're talking about the Middle East conflict. What is going on there? How are the Palestinians supposed to function with their infrastructure certainly compromised, but destroyed? I mean, how are they supposed to get water? I mean, you have the hospital system that has almost been, well, that's certainly been destabilized. You have some of the top doctors who've been killed. What are they supposed to do?
Yeah. When I went with Ron Brown, it was the first time he'd gone to Gaza in 1994. He told me, he said, I just came a couple of weeks ago. I was in Soweto. He said, this is worse. I've never seen anything like it. The Israelis de-developed Gaza in the early years of occupation, i.e., the economy that had been started, they squashed. There was no infrastructure. You would be in Jabalia refugee camp and there'd be water, pools of water in the street, no rain. It was open sewage. Nothing was done by the Israelis to improve the infrastructure. The poverty was overwhelming. You had youth unemployment for decades of 70%, meaning most young people, no job, no prospect of a job, and therefore no prospect of having a decent family life. And that has been the situation all these years. And even what was built up was destroyed. I mean, there was the war in 2008 and 9, the war in 2010, and then 12, and then 14, and now have taken a horrific toll. I mean, the infrastructure hasn't been rebuilt since 2014, and now this again. And remember, 2008, the UN report declared that it was a war crime. The devastation then was just amazing, and yet nothing was done. What they did was, the guy who wrote the principal author, there were three authors. One of them was a Justice Goldstein from South Africa, who I got to know and meet and speak with a couple of times. They pummeled him into submission by not allowing him to visit his family in Israel, denying him access to the country. He was so hurt that he said, "Okay, I withdraw my name from the report." But pummeling people and getting them to recant doesn't change the reality of what you've done. And so, yeah, I mean, I think that the people of Gaza now simply have a more horrid life than they had before this all started. I don't expect anything to change. The U.S. is saying that they're going to help rebuild. I doubt seriously that we're going to do that. I can't see Republicans who won't put money into building the infrastructure of our own country going to spend it in Gaza. This is all around just a nightmarish tragedy for people. And if there were any compassion or any sense of humanity, we would have stopped it before it started. And we would today devote energy to making sure Israel never does it again and the Palestinian people have justice.
James Ogby, I have a lot of people who've called in who want to weigh in, and let me go on and do that. Pam from the West Side. Pam, what's on your mind?
Hi, Santita. This is just such a tragedy. Excuse me. I guess my concern. Good morning, Mrs. Ogby. My concern is that in the reporting from the media, which seems overwhelmingly pro-Israel, the first thing we hear is that Israel has the right to defend itself, and then any criticism, constructive or otherwise, is called anti-Semitic. And I reject both because I have criticism, and it's not anti-Semitic. Santita, several years ago, I was at a meeting, and the issue of some of the Jewish issues came up. And then I made a comment. I won't say what the comment was, but after I made it, there were several Jewish individuals that came over to me and said, whispered to me, that we understand that we don't agree with what is going on in Israel. But they say if we speak out as Jewish people here, we will be ostracized from our communities and our organizations. So what I'm saying is this: we have to know the truth, and we have to have real criticism. And the power that has the might, I think, should be willing to show the restraint. I don't know what the solution is. I think the Palestinians they look at the black people here in America, and they simply say that, and I know this is really being simplistic, they don't want to be treated like we are treated in this country. So they fight for the land.
Well, but let
I
me
don't
say
know
this,
if
Pam.
I'm sorry.
They've
Yeah.
also, well, no, they've also been inspired by us because we've been going over there. Particularly, and I think Mr. Zogby can speak to this. Reverend Mrs. Jackson first went in the spring of '79. Didn't realize what how groundbreaking it was and how much heat we would have to take because of it. And then he and Mrs. Jackson went in the fall of '79. There's been a relationship that has been forged between these communities, but not trying to have a relationship at the expense of a relationship with the Jewish community. We saw then, Mr. Zogby can speak to this because he's been part of this, that this was not going to end well for the Palestinians and for Israel. Because I don't think Israel is any more secure, Mr. Zogby. They're not.
And then, Santita, may I make one other statement?
Yes.
Sure.
The last statement is, we talk about Netanyahu, but let's talk about the terroristic acts that he's committed. And is this all a part in trying to solidify, I guess, his government because he's corrupt and in trouble? So is it let's start a war so that the people will now see the conflict and know that I'm the one that has to reign, over Israel? And I'll hang up and listen.
Mr. Zogby?
Last observation was pretty much spot on, although I don't know if he started it over that, but I know that he had no incentive to stop it because he saw his opposition crumbling. And yeah, if he does not stay prime minister, he goes to jail. I don't think they wear orange jumpsuits over there, but whatever they wear, they got one waiting for them, measured to size. With regard to our earlier observation, I think one of the most important developments, Santita, is the change in the Jewish community itself. There, from the time I started this back in the 70s, when I met your dad and Jack Odell and other folks who worked with him, there were a couple of Jewish groups that worked, young Jews. There was a group called Brera and another New Jewish Agenda, and then later Tzedek Shalom. The Jewish establishment crushed those groups. I mean, they used more intimidation, as she said, to crush opposition within the community than they even used to crush us. But today they cannot do it. From J Street creating an opening to groups like Jewish Voice for Peace and If Not Now and Bend the Arc and groups of that sort in the Jewish community, young Jews are expressing themselves in rather significant ways in opposition to these policies. They are our allies on this question, and that has changed the dynamic. American Jews are not afraid to speak out anymore, and that's really important. It's changed the dynamic. I remember back in the 80s, it was Ron Walters, who also worked with Reverend. He said to me I remember Reverend tried to get us into the 20th anniversary March on Washington in '83, and Jewish groups said, if you let the Arabs in, we're out. And so a conversation ensued. We stayed in. Reverend fought for us, and it was great. But Ron Walters said to me one time, we don't need a dialogue with the Jewish community. We need a trialogue with African American, Jewish American, Arab American sitting at the table together, because he said, we've had historic ties with both, and we see ourselves as partners with both. That still remains, I think, the reality. Yes, we have learned and we have benefited from the outreach from your dad and from Walter Fauntroy back when, and Joe Lowry and others since then. But, I mean, these folks were heroes. And Malcolm was a hero. And people over there get it. And they also have identified with Black Lives Matter. And what's important is that Black Lives Matter has identified with Palestinians. When we discover that the Anti-Defamation League helps U.S. police departments go to Israel to study, control operations, how to deal with unrest. I mean, what are they saying? I'll tell you what they're saying. When I first saw the scenes coming out of Ferguson, I said, "Oh my God, this is the West Bank." I mean, police departments in many cities treat the community in which they're supposed to be serving as if it were occupied territory. And the lessons that they learn of how to show this overwhelming dominance of, even if you get stopped for a parking ticket, it's with sort of an anger and a domination and an exercise of power to force you into submission. Those are tactics learned that can be unlearned. But I think there's an awareness on the part of the community, the African American community here, and the Palestinian community there, that there's a connection in how they are treated and the aspirations that they seek. There was a time when Black people in America wanted a separate state. Remember the back in the 30s? And it switched from that to civil rights, to equal rights. We demand justice here in America.
5.
It's one country for all. Well, Palestinians are now saying the same thing over there. They're saying, we wanted a separate state. You didn't give it to us. You're not willing to do it. We now want equality, justice, and human rights here at home. We want to be one people together. And they're learning from each other.
And in the motto of the Jackson campaigns of the 80s, a more just society and a more perfect world, Henry, who is one of our Jewish brothers, is going to stay with us. I want to get your comment to Mr. Zogby when we get on the other side of this, everybody. I love you. I'll see you on Keep on the Live with Reverend Jesse Jackson on Sunday and the Saturday morning forum on Impact Television tomorrow. God bless you. Is Henry still there?
He is. Ask for him again, please.
Okay, Henry?
Yes, I'm here.
Hey, honey, I'm sorry I couldn't get you on the air. We're just trying to get as much in as we can. But Mr. Zogby's right here. He's going to be leaving shortly, but he wanted to hear from you.
Well, it's an honor to talk to you. I really appreciate you taking my call.
Thank you, sir.
I'm a Jew who's right with you, with Mr. Zogby. I strongly support the BDS movement. I'm ashamed of Israel. And it's fascism. It's a fascist approach to governance, and particularly toward the Palestinians. We know that Israel only exists because it built over the Holocaust, because of the fact that the Roosevelt administration prevented many, many Jews trying to escape the Nazis from coming to the U.S. That's my opinion. And Mr. Zogby, correct me if I'm wrong, but Albert Einstein was offered the presidency of Israel, which is, I guess, largely a figurehead position, in 1952, I believe, and declined because of the Jewish attitude toward Palestinians.
Both he and Albert Schweitzer wrote rather striking criticisms of Zionism and of the idea of establishing a Jewish state. People forget how many significant Jewish leaders back then were opposed to what that was all about. They wanted a democratic state for everyone, and I think we're kind of getting back to that way of thinking among many people.
Yeah, and I believe that a substantial percentage of American Jews are very much opposed to Netanyahu and his gang. Have had enough of this. I think many of them, like me, support a really just two-state solution, which should have happened 40 or 50 years ago. The U.S. made Israel. The U.S. can change Israel anytime it wants. That's really what it comes down to. Just that most of the politicians are terrified of losing the Jewish vote. I think that's a lot of it. Do you agree with that?
Well, I think that's the myth, but I think the reality is that American Jews vote progressive and have supported politicians even when the sort of the major pro-Israel organizations have said don't vote for this guy. They vote for him anyway. They voted for when Jamal Bowman ran against Elliot Engel in the Yonkers and part of the Bronx. the amount of money that major Jewish organizations poured into saving Engel. Bauman won. He not only won in the black community, but he won in Jewish neighborhoods. They don't get the fact that the Jewish community is progressive, liberal, and is increasingly more supporting justice. And so, yeah, I mean, I think there's a myth that if you do this, you'll end up getting beaten, and that myth is spread by organizations who want to use fear. But the fear has been broken. I mean, I remember in '88, Santita, when we had the Democratic Convention and there was the debate on Palestinian rights. I spoke from the podium of the convention to put forward the plank. The New York Times wrote the next day, Arab versus Jew at the Democratic Convention. And I laughed and I wrote a critique about that, saying it actually was Arab and Jew versus Jew, because we had as many progressive Jewish Democrats in our Jackson campaign as we had Arab American delegates in the campaign. We were together supporting that plank against the establishment on the Dukakis side. It's always been that way, but it's increasingly that way today. I'm going to go, but thank you so much for having me, and thank you, Henry.
Thank you so much for being there to discuss this with me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Henry.
Okay, thanks.
Do not be faint of heart, Henry. It takes.
I just want to say this.
I have a feeling that Henry is not faint of heart.
Me too. I love you, Jim Zogby. Mr. Zogby, thank you so much for being with me
today. Take care. Thank you. Bye-bye.
I just want to say one last thing, Santita.
Yes, of course.
Essentially, what they're, my own fellow Jews are committing a genocide. That's what it comes down to.
Well, you know what? I think that when
people put it that way.
I think that when people have not learned, people do to other people what's been done to them. And when people have not learned their lessons, they repeat the hate and the pain. And my prayer and work is that we will bend that arc, because all Jewish people don't feel this way. And I want us to understand that, number one. And then, but we have to challenge. We have to challenge this community to go another way. Because, that's, when they talk about power, absolute power corrupting and absolute power corrupting absolutely, this is what happens. With power, we become very aggressive and very mean. And if it's not tempered if it's not rooted in that which is good and that which is healed, that which is godly, you have a lot of pain, you have a lot of death, you have destruction. And so we just have to continue to move forward and push, and not in a hateful way. That's something that I think we learned from Gandhi, we learned from Dr. Martin Luther King, we've learned from our great leaders. We don't do this in a hateful way, even when hate is being spewed. We have to have the strength of love and really push in that direction.
One last point. I don't want to keep you. Appreciate your time. I think many rabbis, Jewish clergy, are afraid to speak out for fear of being seen as traitors and for fear of losing their pulpits. That's my impression. So it'd be great if you get some of them on the show. I'd like to hear from them.
Okay,
I
will do that. I'll expand this conversation. I certainly will.
All right.
But I want to thank you for calling in. No. Thank you for calling in. Thank you.
My pleasure. I listen all the time. Take care.
I appreciate my sweetie. Keep your head up.
Stay
and
well.
Have a great weekend.
You too.
Thank you so much. Paul, do we have Rick?
We should, yes.
Okay, let me bring him up before we go. Hey, Rick, what's on your mind?
So I just wanted to say a few things. I thought I love your last guy, Mr. Zogby. I'm outside something else.
We can't hear you.
And
you're outside, Rick?
Yeah, I know. I'm sorry that L was going over my head.
Oh no. Okay, good.
So yeah. I love their. I took a little exception to your previous guest calling Zionism, comparing it to Nazism. But I will say this: I think certainly a two-state solution is the only solution to this problem. I think they tried to create a democracy between the Arab Palestinians and the Jewish Israelis, and it's just not going to work. And I think nothing short of a two-state solution is what they should be looking for. And so, what does that entail? Well, I mean, Israelis are the big bully on the block. They got to stop being the big bad bully. But I think also that the Palestinians need to, their leadership needs to recognize that violence is not working. I think Martin Luther King said this during the Civil Rights Movement. With the nonviolent resistance tactics that he used, that African Americans were not best served using violence, and I certainly think that Palestinians are certainly in that same boat. They are not best served using violence.
Yeah, but I don't think there's equivalency there, and I think that's where we have to be very, very careful. One side has rockets, the other one is a nuclear power. And so, while I believe
that's my point, though.
Well, no, I believe in nonviolence. I absolutely do. But I think that what we have to do is be very, very honest about what is happening over there, because today it is the Palestinians who are without clean water. They're basically without a hospital structure. It's just there are things, during the Second World War, it was agreed that you were not going to attack the great monuments in Paris. They were too precious. So, I'm hoping that this is, clearly the conversation, Rick, is shifting. It's shifting. And I think if we're going to call on Palestinians to be nonviolent, we have to do with the same kind of fervor Israel. It's got to be, there has to be equivalent, but we don't do that. We keep talking about how violent they are. No, I think we're dialoguing here. We can't continue to. We can't continue to call them.
That's why
violent.
I said Israel needs to stop being the big bully.
Yeah,
right. That's why I said they have to stop being a bully.
Not just bully.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Santita.
No, it's just so. This is. You know what? We're not going to have. They're not going to be more secure, and the Palestinians are not going to get justice if we continue this way. And so it is my hope and prayer. And like I said, work, because mind you. It's been a long, long road to even get to this point. I saw the hits that Reverend took when he went to the Middle East in '79. My mother went first, then he went. And then I got read the Riot Act in my Harvard interview because of this. Mind you, Harvard called me, but they took umbrage with my father's politics and told me so. And they said they had to fight to get me through committed. Got accepted anyway, but I went to Howard anyway, but there are a lot of hits that people have taken, and it needs to stop because this has all been done in the service of helping Israel to be secure, Palestinians to have justice, and we just have to work to get there. And we have to honestly look at what everybody is experiencing. I don't want any Israeli to feel insecure, and I don't want Palestinians to be without water in hospitals today. And to be afraid of not just rockets, but one of the most powerful military forces on earth. What has been in the past, Rick, it's not working. And I hope that we come to that realization that what has been happening is not working. It's not.
I couldn't agree with you more. I agree. But I think that a two-state solution is where you have to start, because if you have this quasi or proto-state of Palestine, it just gives Israel an invitation to continue their infringement on their sovereign territory with the new settlements. And I think that obviously Israel's not going to recognize their settlements as long as we allow, as long as they're allowed to continue to infringe on that. So I think if Palestine is recognized as a state, that's a whole different ballgame.
Do you think that America has a role to play in all of this? Given all the money.
Well, of course we do.
No, it's not of course. I make no presumption. So I'm just asking you, what do you think we should do?
Well, look, what we should do is what I don't think we're going to do. What we should do is broker a legitimate two-state deal.
Well,
that should have been done 40 years ago.
Rick, unless we do what we're supposed to do, we're not going to be in the deal. And that's the thing. Because unless only honest brokers get things done. I mean, so if America wants to continue to hold on to the authority that we certainly earned after the Second World War, we too are going to have to go another way. I mean, we have to push for justice for everybody. I mean, that's,
I agree.
That's really it. And security for everybody. That's just it. And that's something that some people have been pushing for decades. And now the needle has moved. And so we will see where this goes. Because, Rick, this ceasefire is as much a reflection of American public opinion as anything. Because the American public said enough. And I think Americans need to know just how important our thoughts are, just how important our actions are, our activism is. Because Americans started calling for this to stop. Americans started seeing how awful and unjust this was. And I think that because of that, we pushed the president. And then other forces who are here, who are friends of Israel, said, you need to stop. This is not working. I think it's all of that. All of that pressure is what's going to matter. And I'm hoping, Rick, that going forward, like I said, I don't want justice. I don't want revenge. I want justice. That's going to take
we both want the same thing.
I think so. And I'm going to go, but I want to thank you for calling today. And I'm going to give you the final word.
Yep.
Your final thought.
Like I said, I think that once again, I think that it's like you said before, or like we both agree upon. The United States has to take the lead on this, and I think nothing short of a two-state solution is the solution. Otherwise, it's really and it has to be based off an understanding that Israel is going to be Israel, Palestine is going to be Palestine, and then also, if we're going to give aid to Israel, we're going to prop up Palestine as well, because they need a lot of economic aid as well to get out of this impoverished state that they're in as well.
Absolutely.
So that's it.
Well, no, thank you. And you know what? Before I go, a lot of people have been asking me about my father today, and he's doing quite well. He is. We're all heading to Washington. My youngest brother, my baby brother's sister, my baby brother's daughter, is going to be graduating from high school. And so this has been a graduation. So thank you so much. She is, I can't believe she's taller than her aunt is. I can't believe this. Rick, I'm like, where did the time go? Wait a minute. And she'll be at Brown in the fall. We're all very, very proud of her, but we're all headed to her graduation.
I'm a coach of a basketball team.
Yes.
I'm a coach of a basketball team, and my team played another team in a regional game, and our team was fortunate enough to have played in front of your father. He was in the front row.
Oh, really?
At Crane Prep about a couple of years back.
Crane?
And I'm embarrassed to say,
one of my rival schools.
I'm embarrassed to say. What? Yeah, I'm embarrassed to say, when I asked all my players, do you know who that guy is right over there? None of them could identify the father. I'm like, oh my God. And when I told them, I'm like, you know, that guy was on the balcony with Martin Luther King.
Well, he was
when
talking
he got shot,
to him.
And they were all.
He was talking.
Yeah, they're like, all their jaws just dropped. They're like, that guy right there. I'm like, yeah, that's Reverend Jesse Jackson, guys. I'm like, I was like, oh, guys, come on.
Bless your heart.
But anyway.
Well, I thank you for your activism and for all that you are doing. Thank you so much.
Thank you. No, thank you for your time. I appreciate you taking my call, and I certainly will call again and try to call in earlier so I can get on the show and express my views.
Oh,
and
bless your heart. Well, everybody on Facebook's listening to you, and just keep on listening. Thank you for your support, Rick.
Thank you.
God bless you, and be safe. Have a great weekend. It's going to be a beautiful one here.
You too. Enjoy your trip to D.C.
Thank you so much. I'm looking forward to it. I love you, everybody. Have a wonderful, wonderful weekend. Rick, you be careful up there, up under the L tracks. I love everybody. I love you. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you for a wonderful week. And I want to wish everyone a wonderful weekend and hope that you will join me. Of course, you've got the Rainbow, the Operation Push Saturday Morning Forum, and we've got Keep Up Alive with Reverend Jesse Jackson on Sunday. Go to your iHeart app so you can hear that nationally syndicated show. But we'll be streaming on the Santita Jackson page and the Reverend Jesse Jackson Senior page and on Instagram and everywhere. And on YouTube on the Santita Jackson Show page. I love you, everybody. Have a great weekend. Carol and Jewel and D-Ray and let me see, Makiba, hey, sweetie, Maddie, let me see. I saw Michael Ann a little earlier. Carol, sending you all much love. Thank you, Barbara. Thank you. I love you. I love you all. Thank you so much for everything. You make this Linear Bob. You make it all worth it every day. I love you. Have a wonderful weekend. And maybe I'll see you on Sunday. Love you.